The night went silent at exactly 12:17 a.m. Not quiet. Not calm. Silent. No wind through the pine trees. No hum from the highway 2 miles out. No distant dogs. No insects. Even the old clock over the fireplace stopped ticking. I noticed it because the house felt hollow, like sound had been scooped out of the air and carried away. I remember holding my breath, not because I meant to, but because my body didn't trust the moment. Christmas lights still glowed in the window. Red, green, soft and warm. Too warm for how cold the air felt against my skin. That's when I heard it. Not a sound. A pressure. Like something listening. I took one step toward the front door. The floorboard didn't creak. That's when I knew something was wrong. This house always creaked. Always. Then, 3 slow knocks. Not loud. Not urgent. Measured. As if whoever stood outside already knew I was there. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. The 3rd knock came again, softer this time. Then a voice, right against the door. Not shouting. Not whispering. Just close. "You said we could come back." My stomach dropped. I had never said that. I reached for the door handle anyway. The lights went out. And in the dark, something smiled. The silence didn't leave after that first night. It stayed with me. Thin, stretched tight across the house like a wire I kept brushing against. Even when sound returned, it felt borrowed. Temporary. As if the house was allowing it out of politeness. Not because it belonged. Morning light crept in pale and weak, filtered through fog that hadn't lifted since before dawn. The Christmas lights in the window were still on. I didn't remember plugging them back in after the blackout. I stood in the living room for a long time, staring at the front door. No scratches. No marks. No sign of anything standing there at 12:17 a.m. And yet my chest hurt like I'd been running. I told myself it was stress. Old house. Old memories. Moving back does that to people. It drags things up. I'd read that somewhere. Trauma doesn't stay buried. It waits for familiar ground. Still, when I noticed the clock, my hand started shaking. It was running fast. Not broken fast. Not erratic. Deliberate. Like it was trying to catch up to something it had missed. I unplugged it. At noon, it chimed anyway. That was when I found the carving inside the doorframe. For words etched shallow, almost polite in how careful they were. "We waited last time." I touched the letters. The wood was warm. I pulled my hand back like I'd been burned. I don't remember carving that. I was sure of it. But certainty didn't help much anymore. The house felt subtly rearranged, like someone had lived in it overnight and tried, poorly, to put things back where they belonged. The hallway felt longer. The ceiling lower. The mirrors. Wrong. I avoided them. By late afternoon, I convinced myself to leave. Just for supplies. Just to see people. To hear voices that weren't trapped in old walls. The drive into town was quiet. No radio signal. No birds on the power lines. Fog hung low over the road, swallowing distance until the world narrowed to what was immediately in front of me. Holler's Bend hadn't changed. Same leaning storefronts. Same rusted sign at the edge of town that read Merry Christmas year-round because no one bothered taking it down. People noticed me. I felt it before I saw it. The way conversations slowed, then stopped. Eyes followed me through windows, from behind counters, from parked trucks that didn't start when I passed. At the general store, the bell over the door rang too loud. Mrs. Calder stood behind the counter. She'd always been old, even when I was a kid. Some people didn't age, they just settled. She rang up my things in silence. Canned food. Batteries. A flashlight I hoped I wouldn't need. Then she stopped. Didn't look at me. Didn't scan the last item. "You're staying the night," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I replied. My voice sounded smaller than I expected. Her fingers tightened around the counter. "In that house?" "Yes." She finally looked up. Her eyes were wet but steady, like she'd already done her crying years ago. "You shouldn't." I waited for more. People like Mrs. Calder never stopped at one sentence. Warnings came layered, wrapped in half-truths and town history. But she only shook her head. I leaned in, lowering my voice. What happened there? She swallowed. Nothing, she said. Then, quieter. And that's the problem. Outside, dusk was already setting in. Too early. The fog thickened, pressing in close like it was curious. I didn't drive home right away. I sat in the truck with the engine running, watching the road disappear ahead of me. I thought about turning around, about finding a motel, about not being where I was expected to be. That thought, expected, made my stomach knot. When I finally pulled back into the driveway, the house looked alert. Lights on. Curtains parted just enough to suggest someone had checked the road. I knew I was alone. I also knew I wasn't. Inside, the air felt charged. Heavy. Like before a storm. The clock was plugged back in. I hadn't plugged it in. It read 11:17 p.m. I stood there, keys still in my hand, heart starting to race. That's when the radio, silent all day, clicked on by itself. Static hissed. Then a voice, barely audible beneath it. Familiar. You came back. The clock jumped forward a minute. And somewhere deep in the house, something shifted, not moved. Awakened. The silence was coming again. I could feel it counting down. The silence arrived that night at 11:43 p.m. Not all at once. It never did. First, the radio died mid-static, like someone had pinched its throat. Then the refrigerator's hum faded into nothing. The house didn't go quiet. It emptied. Sound drained out of it the way warmth leaves a body. I stood in the living room, watching the second hand on the clock crawl forward too fast, my chest tight, my mouth dry. Christmas lights blinked softly in the window. Red. Green. Red. Green. Still working. Everything else was gone. I whispered, "Not tonight." The words felt stupid as soon as they left my mouth. The house didn't respond to pleading. It never had. A pressure settled behind my eyes. A headache blooming from nowhere. I sat down hard on the couch, palms pressed to my temples, and that's when the first shift happened. The hallway door, closed a second ago, eased open. Just an inch. I stared at the gap. The darkness inside it looked thicker than the shadows around it, like the hallway was holding on to something. I didn't move. The door opened another inch. That's when I remembered the rules. Not written rules. Not spoken ones. The kind you learn by surviving long enough to notice patterns. The house only did things when I acknowledged them. So I didn't. I closed my eyes. The floor creaked. I opened them again. The hallway stretched farther than it should have. Not dramatically. Not like a nightmare. Just enough to be wrong. The far wall looked farther away, the ceiling dipping slightly lower, as if the house were leaning in to listen. "Stop," I said. The word landed flat. From somewhere deep inside the house, beneath the walls, beneath the floors, I felt a response. Not a sound. A recognition. There you are. The first knock came from the back of the house. 3 taps. Slow. Patient. Not on the door. On the wall. I stood up so fast the couch shifted behind me. My pulse thudded in my ears, loud enough that for a moment I thought the silence had broken. It hadn't. I walked toward the kitchen, each step careful, deliberate. The floorboards didn't creak under my weight. They absorbed it. The second knock came closer. Same rhythm. Same spacing. I reached the kitchen doorway and froze. The calendar on the wall had changed. Yesterday, it had read December 25th. Now it read December 24th. I stepped closer, heart hammering. The ink looked fresh. Wet. "No," I whispered. The third knock came from behind me. I spun around. The hallway was shorter again. Normal length. The door at the end shut tight. Then the whisper came, not from one place but many. Inside the walls. Under the floor. Behind my eyes. "You're early." I backed into the counter, hands gripping the edge hard enough that my knuckles burned. "I didn't invite you," I said. Louder now. Firmer. "This isn't how it works." A pause. The clock jumped forward a minute. Then another. The whisper returned. Closer. Clearer. "You did. Once is enough." The words triggered something buried deep, something I'd spent years refusing to examine too closely. Memories cracked open. Not all at once, but in fragments. Snow piled high against the windows. My mother's hands shaking as she poured coffee for a stranger. My father standing in the doorway, blocking my view. And the man outside. Tall. Too thin. Smiling like he already belonged. I sank to the kitchen floor, breath coming fast and shallow. My head throbbed, images colliding. Christmas lights reflected in the glass, my father's voice low and tense, my mother crying quietly in a bathroom later that night. I had been told it was a storm traveler. Someone stranded. Someone you help. Because it was Christmas. Because turning someone away on Christmas was bad luck. Because you don't say no when the house is watching. A sound pulled me back to the present. Footsteps. Not walking. Pacing. Above me. In the ceiling. I scrambled to my feet and ran for the stairs. The silence pressed harder the closer I got, like the house was resisting my movement. Each step felt heavier than the last. Halfway up, a voice drifted down. My mother's. Soft. Tired. "We tried to warn you." I stumbled, catching myself on the railing. My hands came away cold. Too cold. "Where are you?" I shouted. The voice didn't answer. The pacing overhead stopped. Then, laughter. Not hers. Never hers. I reached the second floor and bolted into the bedroom, slamming the door behind me. The lock clicked into place with a sound that felt too loud in the dead air. The room smelled wrong. Not rot. Not mold. Old warmth. Like a room that had been occupied recently. By memory. The bedspread was folded back. I hadn't done that. On the nightstand sat a photograph I hadn't seen in years. Me. 10 years old. Standing between my parents. Christmas morning. All three of us smiling. But my father's hand, his grip on my shoulder. Too tight. I picked up the photo, hand shaking. On the back, written in careful handwriting. One night was the deal. The knocking started again. This time on the bedroom door. 3 knocks. Slow. Measured. Right behind the wood. I didn't answer. I didn't breathe. The whisper slid through the crack beneath the door. We waited. Something pressed against the door from the other side. Not pushing. Just resting there. Testing. My knees buckled. I slid down the wall, curling in on myself, trying to make sense of the flood of memories finally breaking free. The truth came back in pieces. My parents hadn't invited a man into the house. They'd invited the silence. A thing that lived between moments. Between sounds. Something old enough to know the weight of promises and patient enough to let them rot. It fed on being welcomed. On thresholds crossed willingly. On nights that mattered. Christmas mattered. It always came back on Christmas. The deal had been simple. One night of silence. One night where nothing bad happened. In return, the house would be spared. For a time. But deals like that didn't end. They paused. And when my parents died, years apart, sudden, quiet, the pause ended. The knocking stopped. The pressure lifted. I stayed on the floor for a long time, staring at the door, waiting for it to break, to open, to do something. Nothing happened. Eventually, sound seeped back into the world. The heater kicked on. The clock slowed to something almost normal. I didn't sleep. At dawn, I found the house rearranged again. Chairs facing the hallway. Doors open that I'd closed. The calendar flipped back to December 25th. Outside, footprints circled the house. Dozens of them. All stopping at the door. I drove into town as soon as the fog thinned enough to see the road. I needed answers. Names. Something solid. I found them at the church. Old records. Handwritten journals. A caretaker's notes from decades ago, tucked away in a drawer that hadn't been opened in years. Mrs. Calder found me there. She didn't look surprised. "It started again," she said. I nodded. She sat beside me, her movements slow, careful, like sudden gestures might draw attention. "Your parents weren't the first," she continued. "Just the last ones who tried to control it." "What is it?" I asked. She shook her head. "A door," she said, "that learned how to knock back." That night as I drove home, the silence gathered early. And I knew. It wasn't waiting anymore. It was coming. The silence didn't arrive that night. It was already there, waiting inside the house when I opened the door, thick as breath held too long. The porch light buzzed once and went dark behind me, cutting off the last proof that the outside world still existed. Inside, the Christmas lights were on again. Every strand. Every bulb. Bright enough to hurt. The clock read 11:59 p.m. I didn't move. I didn't take my coat off. I stood there in the entryway, keys digging into my palm, listening to nothing and feeling everything. The house shifted. Not a sound, a decision. The front door locked itself. The clock ticked once. Midnight. The lights went out all at once. And the house inhaled. I felt it in my chest, in my ears, in the soft places behind my eyes. The walls bowed inward slightly, as if the structure were bracing against pressure from the inside. The air turned colder, sharper, cutting into my lungs. Then the whisper came. Not layered this time. Singular. "Close. You kept the promise." I turned slowly. The living room wasn't the living room anymore. It was Christmas morning from 20 years ago. Exactly as I remembered it. The same couch. The same tree. The same burn mark on the carpet where an ember had fallen and never been fixed. My parents stood by the fireplace. Alive. Smiling. Too still. My mother's eyes tracked me as I stepped forward. My father's smile never changed. "Stop," I said. My voice cracked. "You're not them." My mother tilted her head. "We are what you asked for." The clock ticked again. Too loud. Too close. I noticed then that the shadows in the room were wrong. They leaned away from my parents, stretching toward me, pooling at my feet like something eager. Behind them, the hallway stretched open, longer than it had ever been, its darkness pulsing faintly like a throat. A shape moved inside it. Tall. Narrow. Unfinished. It stepped forward and the silence deepened, pressing down until my ears rang. It wore my father's face badly, like a mask pulled too tight. Its mouth opened. "One night," it said. "That was the deal." "I was a child," I whispered. "I didn't know." The thing smiled wider. "You remembered." The room folded. Walls peeled back like paper, revealing other rooms beneath, other Christmases layered on top of each other. I saw flashes, neighbors at the door decades ago, candles burning low, hands shaking as they welcomed the quiet inside. Every memory ended the same way. No screams. No struggle. Just absence. The thing stepped closer. Each step erased sound where it landed. My heartbeat dulled. My breath thinned. "Say it," it whispered. "Invite us." I shook my head, backing away. No. The house responded. Doors slammed open all at once. Windows rattled silently. The hallway surged forward, swallowing the living room, drawing everything toward it. Hands rose from the floor, shadows with fingers, grabbing my ankles, my calves, pulling me down. Cold flooded my legs, numbing, claiming. I screamed. No sound came out. The thing loomed over me, its face slipping, features melting into something older, deeper, made of waiting and patience and empty years. "Christmas ends," it said. "Silence stays." I thought of my parents. Not the figures standing there now, but the real ones. Tired. Afraid. Trying to protect a house instead of a child. I stopped fighting. I looked at the thing and did the only thing it didn't expect. I laughed. It faltered, just for a moment. I forced the words past my numb lips. "You were invited," I said slowly. "To the house." The shadows stilled. The thing leaned closer. "Yes." But not to me. I twisted, slamming my palm into the floor, into the cold spot where the shadows were thickest, and withdrew. I took back every memory I'd tried to bury, every fear. Every night I'd pretended the silence hadn't been there. The house screamed. Not aloud structurally. Walls cracked. The hallway collapsed inward, folding on itself like a wound closing too fast. The thing shrieked as the invitation tore away from it, its form unraveling into strands of shadow that lashed and recoiled. "You cannot undo Christmas," it roared. "I don't have to," I said, teeth chattering. "I just have to leave." The front door burst open. Sound rushed back in all at once. Wind, distant dogs, the hum of the world crashing through the vacuum. The thing recoiled, dragged backward by the collapsing hallway, its screams breaking into static. I crawled, stumbled, fell through the doorway as the clock shattered behind me. The house went dark. Behind me something slammed shut, and the silence, for the first time, stayed inside. I woke the next morning on the front lawn, hands scraped, clothes damp with frost. The house behind me looked ordinary again. Windows unbroken, lights off, the kind of quiet that felt safe, but I knew better. The snow crunched underfoot as I stood, feeling the emptiness where the silence had been. The air smelled of pine and smoke from distant chimneys, and birds sang somewhere far away, oblivious to what had happened. For a moment, I almost believed it had been a dream. I walked around the perimeter of the house, checking doors and windows. Everything locked. Nothing moved. No footprints in the snow except my own. Yet I could feel it, the residue of that night, a weight that lingered on my chest, pressing silently. Neighbors said nothing. They looked at me like I belonged to the place now. Too quiet, too careful. I tried to return to normal life. Tried to work, to eat, to sleep. The television hummed in the evenings, the fridge purred in the kitchen, the heater cycled normally. Yet at night, when the world outside faded, I would hear it. Faint knocks behind walls that should not be hollow. A whisper beneath the floorboards. Sometimes, in the dim glow of Christmas lights still stored away in the attic, I would catch the reflection of something leaning in just past the window. Watching. Waiting. I never told anyone what happened. Who would believe it? A story like that doesn't end with warmth or laughter. It ends with silence. And the silence, I learned, is patient. Years later, I returned to that house on Christmas Eve. Not inside. Just the driveway. The lights are gone, the windows shuttered, but I can hear it waiting. The same knocks. 3. Measured. The silence has learned my rhythm now. It knows I'll be here, even if I never step inside. Some nights, I swear I hear it calling my name. Not angrily. Not urgently. Just quietly. Waiting. A reminder that what was invited once, and dismissed, never truly leaves. And each Christmas, I wonder, if I knock even once, will I be welcomed back? The thought lingers long after the car drives away. Long after the streetlights fade. Long after the world goes silent. Because the house still waits. And it always remembers.